special and I would even dare say historic event. As everybody knows, we have Julia Margaret Brigham with us, and Angela and I have been privileged, and James also, to have Julia Margaret as our traveling companion from New York. She actually came all the way from Mexico, and I was in New York 4 weeks ago on a Sunday, having dinner with Viola and Matthew, many of you know them, and suddenly it struck me in the middle of dinner. You must go home, and before you go to bed, no matter how late it is, you have to pick up the phone and call Julia Margaret and say to her, come with us to India, 2 weeks notice. I knew that it was totally unreasonable and impossible, but for once I followed my inner guidance. I picked up the phone when we got home and I called Julia Margaret and I heard silence on the other end of the line. I said, well, my job is done, I put it on your plate. And all she said was, you know, I've been thinking of going to India. I had the intention of going to India this year. But I thought that it was impossible. Let me get back to you. And in a day I got an email saying, my husband says I should go. And ever since then, and you know, she had no passport, no visa, no seat on the plane was full. So everything came together, and to have Julia Margaret here to address you today. I'm very excited about it. And watch your reaction as you hear this story, which is just astounding and so nerve-wracking. She gave a talk in New York a couple of months ago, and about two-thirds of the way through the talk, there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
Get your Kleenex now.
That's right. Or whatever you use here in India, I don't think it's Kleenex. Right. So I'm so excited. Of course, everybody knows I'm not going to steal his thunder, but just as a very brief word of introduction, in case one or two people don't know, Julia Margaret is the daughter of Dr. Ned Burleson, who treated Baba and his party when they had that devastating accident in Oklahoma in 1952. Baba summoned her and her sister and family to the bedside, planted a seed which sprouted 50 years later in a remarkable story of faith and love. So please welcome Julia Margaret Brigham, and I'd like to just say the tape of this talk will be available in January from Divine Wine Studios, and the web address is
DivineWineStudios.net.
DivineWineStudios, one word, .net. Okay, Julia Margaret Brigham. Maybe on your kerchief?
Yeah.
How's it feel to be famous?
Could you test a little bit?
Infamous. Yeah. Infamous.
Can you speak a little?
Oh, sure. Does that sound all right?
Sounds great.
It's all right? Good.
A little loud.
I will. Yeah.
Maybe we'll put it under your...
Okay.
Do the same on this one. There you go.
There. Give Baba pigtails here or something. Well, it's just a real pleasure to be here. I have dreamed of India for over 50 years. And it's there were so many emotions coming forward as I left New Mexico to come on this trip, and I've been prepared, I think, by the Oklahoma gathering of the celebration. Can you hear? Okay.
Yeah, they can hear me.
Okay. The celebration in 2002. And you all know the story of the accident and the part that our family played in it. For me, it's been a mystery. It's been a long mystery. And when I was called by Lynn Wilhite to come to Oklahoma and speak, I thought, well, you know, I don't have a really big story to tell. I can talk about seeing Baba and what that felt like and what the anticipation of getting to meet Baba was about, and I'll tell you that, but I want to tell you more than that. To begin with, Prague, Oklahoma is a tiny town. But if you took a ruler and you went from one corner of the United States to the other and found the center, that's where the center would be. And when Baba said he would shed his blood in the heartland of America, that's exactly what he did. Right dead center in the heart of America. We didn't know what this was about. The society that I come from is Western, mostly Christian. So for us to even think that the living Christ had been in our midst was unthinkable. And yet for 50-something years, it was back here in my head. I was thinking, what if Baba had been the living Christ? Why would he have come to such a little town? Why my father? Why our little hospital? Why not a big hospital? Why not the best doctor in the world? Of course, I thought my dad was the best doctor in the world, but I was prejudiced. So when I heard the ambulance that day, I did what I usually do. I ran out in the backyard, and I had a little place behind a stone wall, and I could hide there and kind of peek around and see what was going on. And I saw them take everyone out of the ambulance, and cars drove up, and I knew it was something bad. I knew something terrible had happened. And my father didn't come home for a long time. And when he did, he said, you know, the people in this accident were from India. Boy, that was exciting, because did you all watch Buster Brown and My Dog Ty and then Kim, you know, when TV first came out, remember? So, and you read Rudyard Kipling and all those stories, you know. So that was our connection to India, and we knew where it was on the map, but we had India just sort of drop in from nowhere, for real, and Daddy kept talking about Baba. Baba this, Baba that, everybody's saying Baba, and that's a strange word. What does Baba mean? And I knew that people were badly injured, so we stayed away from the hospital. And then Monty came to the house, and Monty would come and play with us, and I remember she especially liked our dog. We had a little red Cocker Spaniel named Rusty, and we played with Rusty a lot. And when she came back to India, she sent me a photograph of her dog, and it was a little black Cocker Spaniel, and he was sitting up in a chair, and he had a little hat on, and he had a little basket in his mouth. And she said, was that Peter? I want to say it was Peter. Peter is all dressed up and ready to go to town, and he's impatiently waiting with his basket in his mouth. And I thought that was just the cutest dog I'd ever seen. And it was, to me, that was Mani. She was fun, she was beautiful, and she liked us. She liked to come to our house and play with us. So when she came over one day and said that Baba wanted to meet my sister and me, I was really happy. I didn't really want to take a bath and put on a dress, but but other than that, I was really happy. But we did. We went to the hospital, and now the hospital was just behind our house, so it's just back in our backyard. And we walked into Baba's room, and he was in the bed over in the corner of the room here. We walked in here, and I was on one side of my mother and my sister on the other, and he looked at us and he said, and we walked over next to his bed, and he showed us his alphabet board, and he said something to us, and Adi was there to interpret. And I wish I knew what Baba said, but that was lost probably just in that very moment of being so excited about seeing him. But he did touch us, and he smiled, and he acted like he was very happy to meet us, and in probably 10, 15 minutes that was over, and we went home. So that was the way Baba first came to me. And I'm not going to go any further into the story about the accident, because I think what happened subsequently is more important to our faith. 50 years went by. 50 years of mystery. So I went to Oklahoma. I was determined to find out who Baba's lovers were and who they believed he was and is. The first person I think I met was Liam, and then Leatrice, and Jeff McGuire, and then a lot of other people came in, but these three in particular were very important in the first evening. Leatrice and I talked for quite a while, and I called it an accident. She said, "Oh, my dear, this was no accident. Baba set your family up big time." Well, when she said that, it was like something just piercing my body. And I felt really shaky. And we talked a little bit longer, and then I went to bed. And when I went to bed that night, Baba was right here. He was just right above me, and he was just grinning from ear to ear. And I have a big smile, but it was really big that night. And tears were just flowing like somebody turned on a faucet, and it wouldn't stop. And I thought, "You're crazy. This is just your mind playing tricks on you." And I would wake up and I would look around the room and I'd say, "Okay, thank goodness he's gone," or something. Not really, but as soon as I closed my eyes again, he was back, and he stayed there, it seemed to me, for hours. And he was smiling so wonderfully at me that I felt like it was, "You're back. I've waited all these years, and now you're back." About 10 years before this happened, I had a dream. And I dreamed that I was on a bus. And some of you have heard this before, but I love this dream. And it stopped like at the first look out at the Grand Canyon, someplace like that. And I jumped out, and everybody was off the bus, and I was so busy looking this way and out at the scenery, I didn't even notice that everybody else had gotten on the bus. And so the bus was pulling away, and I ran as fast as I could, and I jumped up and I grabbed a hold of the outside of the bus. And as soon as I did this pain just shot through my body. And it wasn't a dream pain, it was a real pain. And it was like a, and I said, I can't hold on much longer. And immediately I was inside the bus, and I was holding on to that little rim on the back of the seat with both hands like this, but there was nothing underneath me. And once again I thought, I can't hold on much longer. And I looked, and this man, an Indian man, like this kind of Indian man, was sitting in the seat. And I said, tell Baba to stop the bus. And he looked at me, and he went, and when he did that, I immediately knew that everyone on the bus thought that Jesus was driving this bus. And I said, no, tell Baba to stop the bus. I really can't hold on much longer. Tell Baba it's Margaret. He knows me. And when I said that, he tapped the person in front of him, and then the next one, and the next one. And then the bus stopped, and the driver turned around. And when the driver turned around, the whole bus went, oh! And this light shot out from his face like looking into the inside of a seashell. That beautiful pink and coral color. And that light just filled the bus, and it was Baba. And he looked at me, and he just didn't smile. He didn't look like he was happy to see me. He said, pull yourself up by yourself, in that tone of voice. And I levitated, and I turned and sat down next to that man from India, and the bus went right on down the road. So today, when we were coming back from Meherabad, I said, you know what, Baba, I'm finally on your bus. So I wrote that dream to Mani, and she sent me back the sweetest letter. And she said, surely dear Baba has a very wonderful journey for you to take, and it's just beginning. I have to tell you about going to Myrtle Beach for the first time. Now, I'm sure that all of you who have been to Myrtle Beach went there on purpose. I went there by accident. I was with my fiance about 14, 15 years ago. We had gone to North Carolina to meet his family, and then we drove to South Carolina to meet more family. And we were having lunch with his cousin. And he said, well, Bob, you know, I used to come to Myrtle Beach, and there were empty places along the road, and it looks like you all have a t-shirt shop and a beach towel shop about every other, building. And this cousin was very proud of it. He said, oh, yes. Isn't it wonderful? We've been able to develop every square inch of this South Carolina coastline except for 455 acres of the most beautiful property in the state. And we can't touch it because some crazy woman named Elizabeth Patterson talked her father into deeding it over to some Indian guru. Well, all the lights went on because my entire life since Baba came, every year we got cards and letters from Myrtle Beach. And as soon as we got outside, I said, "John, that's Meherabad's place." And he said, "We're on our way." And we drove out there, and I have to set this up. We had just been in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he had wanted to go out and drive around Oral Roberts University. And I don't know if any of you have been there or not, but, okay, yeah, Elaine has. But in front of the hospital, there are hands like this, folded in prayer, that are taller than this building. These big, giant concrete hands. And if you go a little bit, if you go a little bit further down the road, there's this huge thing. It looks like a spaceship just landed, like a flying saucer just landed on legs, and that is the prayer tower. And not to denigrate that in any way, because that's very meaningful to a lot of people, but it just wasn't for me. And so I'm thinking the whole way out to the center, what is this going to look like? What kind of place would Meherabad have in the United States? So, you drive down that big highway, and everything around you for miles is concrete. And then all of a sudden you see trees. Nobody's built anything there. And then there's just that tiny gate with that little tiny sign that says Meher. And we opened the gate, went in, and the sign said stop at the little cottage, so we stopped. And I went in, and a lady came out and said, "May I help you?" And I said that we would just like to see the center. And she said, "Well, do you know about Meherabad?" And I said, "Well, kind of." And I said, my dad was Dr. Burleson, and so I met Baba when I was 10. Well, I could have been Elizabeth Taylor and not had, there was a meeting going on, and this woman was just running through this meeting I was floored, because I couldn't imagine what was so exciting about this, But she ran to the phone and she called Kitty Davy. And she said, "Kitty wants to see you right now." And you remember her, don't you? And I thought, no, not really. She said, "Well, she was driving that second car. She was in the second car." Okay. She's 96 years old, and she wants to see you right now. Well, now, I left my mother just a week before, who was 86 years old, and not doing all that well. And so I'm thinking, I'm going to find this poor woman in a bed, and maybe someone feeding her or something. And I walked in, and in charge is this woman, this like, pow, pow, pow. She was so full of life, I was just floored. And we had a lovely, lovely chat, and she was off to London, and then she was off to India for 3 months. And so she sent, I wrote Monty a little note and asked her if she would give that to Monty, and that was my first reconnection as an adult with Monty. So we toured the center, and I have to tell you that it was the most Christ-like place I have ever experienced. I was absolutely amazed at the feeling I had. I think it was so natural, so genuine, and so welcoming. Nature did not need to be embellished. When I got back to Santa Fe, I received a letter from Monty. And she said, she was so excited to get my note, and she said, "Isn't it wonderful how Baba draws his dear ones back into his circle at the appointed time. So, for the 10 years prior to the gathering in Oklahoma, I had been reading Baba's books and many other books. But I was searching, so I was ready for that experience. The second day in Oklahoma, I got up and I thought, well, I need to do something to help out here because there was a lot of work to be done, and otherwise I would just sort of be in the way. So I offered. And they said, would you drive Shireen into town to buy food for Esfandiar? So, sure. And I'm driving into Guthrie, Oklahoma, and Shireen is sitting over there, and every once in a while she would just do, oh, Baba, oh, Baba, oh, Baba. And I'm like, you know, and I'm kind of like, what is this about? And so she does it 3 or 4 times, and I finally said, Shireen, you have to tell me why you're doing this. And she said, I have prayed to dear Baba for so many years that one day I would get to meet one of the children of the doctor that took care of him. And now you are taking me to the grocery store. And once again, I'm floored because it's the kind of honor that you don't dream. When someone says that to you, you know, I was confused. Why would that be such a thing? Why would it be a big deal? So we talked, and she told me some of the things about wanting to see Baba while she was in Iran before she came to the United States, and that she had written to him and asked him if she could come and meet him, and he sent a letter back saying, no, you can't. You have to stay where you are and take care of your children. But she said, you know what? One day when no one else was in my house, I walked into my living room and Baba was in my living room. He came to see me. And so when Val was talking yesterday about people saying that they've seen, Baba's come to see them or talks to them, yes, Baba does. But when we got back to the campground, she said to me, now you must meet Esfandiar. So I went in to meet Esfandiar, and when we saw each other, it was just like, I just thought it was beautiful. And he reached up and he took my face and he pulled me down to him, and he held me really close. And then he just started touching, and we just started touching each other, and it was just this touch fest. It was just this incredible communication. And this went on and on and on, and at one point he motioned for me to sit at the foot of his bed, and he was in a chair, and he just kept touching and touching, and every few minutes he would stop and he would go, oh. And this, once again, I'm getting kind of, what is going on? And at one point he grabbed my arm with both hands right up here, and he just worked his hand down just holding on very tight like this. And this heat just shot through my arm. And then he started this whole thing over again, just touched my face. And when it was over, he called Shireen in and he spoke to her, and then she smiled and she said, Esfandiar says, for you to love Baba, and love Baba here, not here. You love Baba here. And he repeated this twice. And I went outside and there was a screened-in porch. And this place was beautiful. There was fields full of grass, and the wind was just moving the grass like this. And it was like all those 50 years of mystery had just come together like that. And I felt kind of like I feel right now, just overwhelmed. And then someone touched me on the shoulder, and I turned around and it was Farshid. And he had been in the room the whole time, just kneeling on the floor, but invisible. And he turned me around and he said, what has happened in this room is extraordinary. He said, I've been with Esfandiar for many years and I have not seen this. But Esfandiar recognized you. Do you know what I'm saying? Esfandiar recognized you. Well, that was it. It was cellular at that point. The penetration was astounding. And I remember I went in and I told Beatrice what had happened, and she said, oh my dear, you must go to bed. And she took me to her cabin and put me to bed. And I think when that happens, it's so life-changing that every part of you is affected in a very beautiful way, but I guess when Baba decided it was time for me to come back, he wanted to make sure that I got the message, so he used a club instead of a stick. And the rest of the weekend was just beautiful, and going to Prague and reliving the whole event was wonderful. And I have to tell you a few little details because this is how Baba works. And he's continued to work with me. The gathering had tried to arrange an indoor place to have lunch because it was rainy and we needed to be inside for lunch. And Lynn Wilhite had called every place in that little town, and everyone had said no. Something was happening everywhere. It was graduation, weddings, the Kolachi festival, all these things happening. And it just hit me. The Methodist Church, where we went to church, had built a new sanctuary. So there was the old sanctuary. So I called the minister at the First Methodist Church, the only Methodist church, and I said, could we use the old sanctuary? And he said, well, I guess you could, but there aren't any pews in there. I mean, they've taken everything out, and it's just a youth center now. I said, it's perfect. And we carried chairs upstairs, and it was wonderful. It was where Baba wanted this thing to happen, because this is where our family had gone to church all those years. It's where my father had been in church. My father never attended church in that new sanctuary. And then the Sufis Reoriented from California wanted to do a film they wanted to interview my sister and me. And I suggested we go back to our former home and do it somewhere outside where it was really pretty. But the wind was blowing, and so things just weren't working right. And ultimately, I rang the doorbell and I asked the woman who now owns the house if there would be any way we could come in and have the interview in the house. And she said, "Of course." Are you nuts? And we went into one room, and it was there was a quarry tile floor, and it was full of plants and not very many things that would absorb sound, so the sound was, once again, was not right. Bobby wanted this to happen right where my father used to sit, and he wanted to be able to see the fireplace, and he wanted it in a certain place. And it wasn't right until we got to that place. That was the detail that went on that day. And Pascal and Michael wanted to interview someone that had been in the hospital during that time. So they had the records of everyone that had checked into the hospital. And they had asked me, "Do you think that any of these people would still be alive?" And I said, "I have no idea. I mean, that's 15 years ago." So as my sister and I drove back to Oklahoma City, we were talking about people that would be good to be interviewed, and we thought about our dear friend Nina. Nina had been about 16 years older than me, and my mother always called her her first daughter. And so we said, "Well, we'll call Nina and see if she's up for it." And we called her, and of course she was more than happy to do that. And when Michael and Pascal went to her house, they had the list of people who'd been in the hospital, and her last name was Kemp. And Pascal said, "Nina, you wouldn't know a Mrs. Kenneth Kemp, would you?" And she said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, there was a Mrs. Kenneth Kemp in the hospital when this accident occurred." And she said, "Well, I don't think that could be, because my mother-in-law has never been in that hospital." And she said, "Tell me again when this happened." And he said, "May 24th, 1952. And she said, "Oh, it was me. I was in the hospital." She said, "I just had a miscarriage, our first child. We just lost our first child, and I was very depressed. And I remember my husband coming in and saying, 'Nina, all these Indians are in the hospital.'" And he said, "I don't mean woo-woo Indians, I mean Indians, you know." So she had just blocked this whole thing out, you know, and so Pascal had found his person to interview who'd been in the hospital, and everything that needed to happen just like unfolded effortless. I mean, we didn't have to do anything, you know, and Bobby says, just do your best and let go of the consequences. So, but I went home after this, and when I got home, I had to sleep. I slept every day from about 12 to 4 for at least, 5 or 6 days. Now, there was a dooney the last night in Oklahoma. I have to tell you this. There was a dooney, and all day I worried about what I was going to name my stick, you know. And it just hit me right before we went out to the dooney that maybe I should name this stick resistance. And so I stood at the opening of the Dooney all night and never put resistance into the fire. So when I got back to New Mexico, I thought, well, I'll build a fire. We have a big fire pit where we have barbecues and campfires and stuff. I thought, I'll go out and build a fire and put resistance into the campfire. And but there was a fire ban because danger of forest fires. So I went out one afternoon, and I don't know, I was sitting around this rock campfire, and I thought, I want to call Dinah Snow and order the book of Mani's dreams. Yeah, that's what I want to do. I'm going to go in the house and order that book. And about that time, the mailman drove up and put some mail in the box and put a little package down next to the fence. So I walked over and I got the mail. I picked up the package, and it was from Philip and Susan Lickendorf. And I felt of it, and I thought, this feels like a book. And I tore it open, and it was Mani's dreams. It was just like that. And I was invited to go out to Los Angeles, and I was so excited because I was going to get to meet Val. And that was just a wonderful experience for me, and I met so many wonderful people there. And when I got back to New Mexico, I was so lonely. It was the kind of isolation that just rips your heart out. And I'm a painter, and I've been thinking of this painting for a long time, and it was based on a scripture from the Coptic Gospel of Thomas. Split a piece of wood, and I'm there. Lift a stone, and I'm there. And I was working on this painting, and the longer I worked on the painting, the more, I was just devastated. I didn't have anyone to talk to. And at one point I said, Baba, I just need some of your people to talk to. And I looked at the painting, and there was a place up in the corner. I needed to pull the values closer together so the eye didn't go to the corner. So I just put a glaze over it, and I walked out of the room. And when I walked back into the room and I looked at the painting, Baba's face was there, just as plain as can be. Here's Baba's face. And about an hour later, my phone rang. And it was Nancy Wall from Tucson. I'd met her in Los Angeles. She said, hi, I'm in Taos. Is there any way you could come over Wednesday afternoon and just spend the afternoon with me? Of course I can. Then Friday night, she invited us to dinner, and she left on Sunday. On Monday morning, I got a phone call. Philip Lickendorf. Hi, this is Philip. Guess where I am? I'm in Taos. Is there any way you can come down and have a cup of coffee with me? Well, yes, I'll be down in about an hour. And the next morning, on Tuesday morning, I get a call from Beatrice. Beatrice says, hello, Margaret. John and I are coming to Santa Fe on Wednesday, tomorrow. Is there any way you could come to Santa Fe? Well, of course I can come to Santa Fe. So I called Philip, and Philip and I went to Santa Fe, and we were to meet them at the La Posada Hotel. And as we were waiting for them, Philip stands up and looks and says, Franny, Shireen, hi, what are you doing here? I was surrounded. how much more did I need? You know, when you ask God to answer your prayers and they're answered in such a way, how much more do you need? And resistance still hadn't gone into the fire. And so I was astounded. I was just astounded. And sometime later, I've been thinking about becoming a lay minister for a long time. And I started to attend an Episcopal lay ministry course. And after about 2 sessions, I thought, this isn't what I want. I don't want this. And I was reading a note that Tony Paterniti had written on the Baba listserv, that he was attending One Spirit Interfaith Seminary in New York. And it was an interfaith-based ministry program. So I emailed Tony and I didn't know Tony. I asked him about this program and he said, just go to their website. They'll tell you everything you need to know. 2 weeks later, I was a student. Everything I needed to do, it was immediate. I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I knew at the same time that it was kind of crazy. And at one point, my husband looked at me and said, just tell me again why you want to do this? Well, he was totally supportive, but at the same time, it was, what are you doing? You know? But once again, it was that kind of thing where the recommendations that I needed, the references I needed were, I had like 60 minutes, a window of 60 minutes to get it done, and it was done. And to me, it was like what Baba wanted. It was he wanted me to be there. And I remember at one point I came home and I was very low. Once again, I was kind of flat. You know how you go very along with your faith and you're charged. You're really charged, and then something happens that just sort of knocks you back again. Well, I was in that state of being knocked back again. And Angela had given me a calendar that the New York Baba House puts out. It had been on my desk. I picked it up. I flipped it open, and there was Baba's face looking at me. And I can't remember the quote that month, but I just stood there and sobbed. Once again, it was like, how can I ever even go to that place when you have given me so much? I mean, you know, how much more does a person have to be given? So, the calendar is the first thing I see in the morning now. and I wanted to tell you a little bit about my father because he was a special person. He came from a family of five children. My grandfather had been an attorney, and he was in a gunfight in Texas in the late 1800s. And my grandmother had left him and said, if you're going to continue to put yourself in a situation where people want to kill you because you're going to arrest them for murder, I'm going back to Beaumont, Texas, and you can stay up here in this godforsaken place, but I'm taking the kids and I'm going back. So he decided that he would give up that line of work. And of course, you know, the situation in the early 1900s, you did what you had to do to survive. And ultimately, he moved the family to Norman, Oklahoma, and he was the janitor for all the school system. He cleaned the schools. My father, when they first moved to Norman, they didn't have any money. They had just enough to buy boards for a floor. So they built a floor and bought canvas and sewed a big tent. And they lived in a tent down by the Canadian River, surrounded by these huge trees. And my dad said those were the best days of his life. He loved to play Tarzan. And but at one point he said, you know, I'm going to be a doctor. And they laughed at him. And they said, you can't be a doctor. That costs a lot of money to go to medical school. And we don't have any money. And he said, oh, I'll be a doctor. And my father put himself through medical school, doing every nasty job that anyone asked him to do. And when they finally got out of medical school, he and my mother, it was in 1928, they went to Borger, Texas during the Dust Bowl days. There was not a blade of grass. My mother said, I won't live here. So they went back to Oklahoma. And they heard about this little town, Prague, Oklahoma. It was a clean little town. It was a nice little town. It was settled by Czechs. And my mother thought that that would be just fine. Now you have to understand my mother. She was very proper. Everything had to be very clean, perfect. And they went to this little town, and my dad had a little office over the bank. And one day he came home and he said, I'm going to build a hospital. And I thought my father could do anything. And it turns out he could. And he did build a hospital, and he didn't have any money. But the Ford Foundation bought the x-ray equipment, and some other foundation did the surgical suite and the delivery room, and they just scraped together the money wherever they could. And that hospital opened about a year before Baba got there. Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing.
And Daddy was the kind of person that almost hated to take money for what he did because he loved doing it so much. I can remember when he had to raise the price of prenatal delivery and postnatal care from $75 to $150. It just killed him. And trust me, if you didn't have the $150, you still got the treatment. I mean, you still got the best treatment. And he was a wonderful surgeon. He was a wonderful family doctor. And he was the best example a child could ever have. We had a man named Monroe that took care of my mother's flowers in her garden. And he was always in the yard. He didn't say much. And years later, I found out that he had a really bad disease, and Daddy took care of him all those years, and all he had to do was come up and just weed the flower beds and just putz around in the yard and do things. But one day I went to have some prints made in Oklahoma City. This was after I'd had my Baba dream. And I went into the color separator, and I was introduced, and I recognized the name, and I said, you know, did you go to Oklahoma University? He said, no. I said, did you go to school in Oklahoma City? No. I grew up in this little town called Prague, Oklahoma, about 50 miles east of here. And I said, do you know who I am? And he said, no, I don't think I do. I said, well, when we knew each other, my name was Margaret Burleson. And when I said that, he just reached out and just grabbed me and held me so tight, pulled me into his office, set me down, and he said, I have to tell you a story about your father. He said, do you remember when we lost our house? We lost everything. We didn't have clothes. We didn't have any furniture. I said, I remember that because my dad wanted to move the entire family into the basement of our house because we had a full kitchen in that basement. And of course, from my mother's point of view, that was not going to happen. So what my father did, he came home and he literally took my bed and my sister's bed out of our bedroom, had it loaded on a truck. He took clothes, he took toys, I think he even took my bicycle. And I remember coming home from school and I didn't have a bed. And he said, well, when I got home from school that day, I had a bed. I had your bed. We had clothes to go to school in. And your dad even arranged to have it delivered because we didn't have a truck to pick it up. And when we needed a swimming pool, my father went to Oklahoma City and had plans drawn up for a whole park. And the next summer we had a swimming pool. When I was in the 6th grade, I came home from school and he said, well, I bought a farm today. I said, well, why would you buy a farm? We're not going to move to a farm, are we? He said, no, but we need a farm. We need this land. He bought a whole section of land that was just on the edge of town. Daddy was on the school board for 32 years. And just when I graduated from high school, the high school building was condemned. And they said, what are we going to do? We have to build a new high school. We'll have to tear the old one down. And Daddy said, no, don't tear the old one down. We'll just build a new one. And he said, where? And he said, well, you have a whole section of land for a high school. As a matter of fact, you have a whole section of land for a football field and a baseball field and a gymnasium and high school building, junior high building, whatever you want. So he said, take half of it and sell it off for homes. Use the money, build your school. And they said, well, what's this going to cost us? He said, nothing. It was for the school. It's yours. It was a gift. He never thought about his own personal gain because we were so well taken care of. I was so well taken care of. When I was 14 years old, he came home and said, get in the car, we're going to town. And he drove up to the Ford Motor Company and he drove around to the back. He said, get out and go in there, and there's a little white car in there I want you to look at. Just go in and look at it. I went in and I walked around this little white car and I thought it was really nice. And I walked back and I remember I sat back in the front seat just like this, and he said, did you like that little white car? I said, yes, sir, I like that little white car. He said, We'll get in it and drive it home. And I said, Daddy, I'm only 14 years old. He said, do you know how to drive a car? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, then get in it and drive it home. It was a 1956 white Thunderbird. With the Continental kit and everything, you know.
It was beautiful.
Yes, it was, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. So, I was very well taken care of, but everything was done in such a subtle way. It wasn't that we had what we wanted. Usually we didn't get what we asked for, but we got beautiful things that he thought we would love, that we wouldn't have ever asked for, you know. So that's just to give you a little insight as to what kind of person my father was. And in that little hospital, I can tell you that people came from all over to be there and have him take care of them. I feel like I'm leaving something out here.
Did your father ever say anything about Bob? I was here late, so you might have already said that.
No, you know, Daddy was just in awe of Baba. I think because he knew how badly he was injured, and he said he just smiles at me and he doesn't make a sound. And of course I was intrigued. I wanted to ask Baba why he wouldn't talk. I thought he couldn't talk, and then when I found out that he could talk but he chose not to speak, I didn't understand that. And Daddy was very impressed with Baba. He was impressed with everyone. It was really a magical time. I have to tell you about the leopard skin. I forgot that. Several months after everyone left, this brown box arrived in the mail, and I can remember exactly where we opened it in the living room floor. And I put it in the floor, and it was pretty heavy, and it had Bombay India on it, and I tore it open, and it was this huge, full leopard skin pelt. And my mother looked at it and said, "What in the world are we going to do with that?" And I knew exactly what we were going to do with it. I was going to take my door down to my bedroom and hang it, you know, in the doorway. And that didn't happen. What happened was my mother took it to a furrier in Oklahoma City, and she had this little pillbox hat made, and an ascot, and a muff, and a belt. And maybe she wore it once. I can't remember her wearing it, really. It sort of stayed in this silk bag forever. And that upset me for the longest time, because I felt as a child that should never have been cut. It should have. Well, it's here and there. Part of it. Years ago, I was asked to send part of it to the Sufis in California, and I sent 2 pieces, and one went to Washington, D.C., and another is in California. And but there were all these little scraps left over, so I have all these little scraps, and it's really fun to be able to cut a piece off and give it away. It's really fun, and I would never have cut the whole pelt. So it was kind of a blessing that she did that. And I still have quite a bit of it. My sister and I do. I found out today from Meheru that she thinks that her father was the one who had shot the leopard, because he was the hunter. And she said our house was filled with tiger skins and all kinds of wild animal skins and heads and, and she said, and I'm sure that my father probably shot that leopard, and Baba said, oh, send that to the doctor in Oklahoma. So that was something that came full circle for me today. And
Margaret, was there a message that went along with the skin? Was there a message?
I don't think so.
Just that it was a gift from...
Right, it was a gift from Baba. And there was another gift that Sarosh brought to us. When the accident happened, it was my parents' 25th wedding anniversary. And they had a party. And I guess Baba told Sarosh to go to Oklahoma City and buy something appropriate. So he came in with a silver cigarette case. And the cigarette case stayed on this one table until my mother moved out of that house. And that's where all the letters from Baba and Mani and Myrtle Beach, all those things went right there next to that cigarette case throughout all those years. And I wish I had the letters, but I have no idea what happened to them. I have no idea. I have my letters from Mani, but I don't have the other letters.
Margaret, did you mention, I had to leave the room, but did you mention how your father broke down?
Yes.
You did?
Yes. Yeah. And I did check with my brother this summer. I said, Mike, when did the hospital open? And he said it opened in, I think 1950, so it was 2 years before the accident, in May of 1950.
May 24th?
I don't think so.
It's too much.
But do you all know the story of Elizabeth Patterson in 1932?
Go ahead.
Go ahead and tell it. Go ahead and tell it.
It's a good way.
Baba was walking with Elizabeth Patterson at Harmon House in 1932. And he bent down and he picked a little pink flower and he handed it to her and he said, put this in a safe place and mark the date. And she put that in her New Testament. And that New Testament was put into a trunk at some point in time. And many years after the accident, she was cleaning the trunk out and she found the New Testament. And she opened it and she saw the pink flower. And she saw 1932, May 24th, 1932. And when Baba was found in the bar ditch, he was surrounded by those little pink flowers. So how much more do we need? I have to tell you about coming here. When I arrived, well, first, when George called me, my mind was just racing, and I was thinking, how can I go on the 20th of this month? And I sing with the chorus in Taos, and I thought, I'll miss rehearsals. I'll miss the first concerts, and I was just scurrying around, and my mind was racing, and I remember, and I walked in, and I told Daryl, I said, this is a friend from New York, and they've called and invited me to go to India. And he said, go! Why are you even thinking about it? This is what you dreamed of. This is the chance of a lifetime. Go for it. And I was leaving the very next morning to drive to Texas at 4:30 in the morning. I didn't have a passport. I didn't have a visa. I just didn't know how this was going to happen. So when I got to my daughter's house the next evening, I told her, and she immediately, the next morning, she was on the phone calling passport and visa expediters, you know, the folks that really do it in a hurry for you. And she said, well, Mom, I found this one person that sounds really honest and really nice, and here's what you need to do. And she had made a list, and she said, you go to the county courthouse and fill out the papers and get your photographs taken, and then call this number. So I went through the whole thing. So by that afternoon, I had all my forms, my photographs were on their way to Houston to get the passport. Well, George and I were talking to each other about every 15 minutes, and there was this big dilemma about how we could get the visa done. And at first he thought, well, as soon as you get your passport, you send it to me and I'll walk it through in New York. But then a friend in New York told him that probably that wouldn't work, that I needed to do it in San Francisco. But there was something in the back of my mind saying, don't go to San Francisco. Don't go to San Francisco. So the other problem was I needed to get home because I had like 4 paintings to get done for shows and towels that are going to happen before I get home. And I left Saturday morning. The visa wasn't back. The passport wasn't back. And I had decided that my daughter could sign it. Bad idea, she's left-handed. I left to drive back to New Mexico about a little before 6 in the morning, feeling great. I get about 70 miles down the road and my car goes, And I thought, oh no. So I turned around, had to drive back to Fort Worth, took it to a garage, get it fixed. The fellow said, well, maybe I can have it ready by this evening. I don't know, no promises. Well, the car wasn't ready until Tuesday. And I had called the passport company to say, when do you think I'll get my passport? And he said, I hope we'll get it. This was Monday. He said, I hope we'll get it today because Tuesday is Veterans Day and the office is closed, and if we don't get it today, then that means we won't get it till Wednesday. So Tuesday morning, I called him back. He said, I have your passport. The fellow fixing my car called and said, your car is ready. I went over to my son-in-law's veterinary hospital to use their computer to download the form from San Francisco because George was just quite certain I needed to go through San Francisco. It wouldn't download. It just came out garbled.
Oh my God.
And something said, forget it. This isn't the way to go. Go back to Houston. Let the expediter do it for you. So I went home. The fellow came with my passport. I signed it. We filled out the visa forms. He took it. He had the visa by Friday. And when I got to New York, I had everything I needed. I had everything I needed, just like that. And when I called Beatrice to tell her I was coming, she says, well, you know, this is how Baba works. You know, this is Baba doing this because everything is quick, hurry. You have to help out. So, are there any other questions? Is there? Yes.
Waiting list for the airline.
Pardon?
You mentioned that all the seats were filled. How did that come about that the flight opened up for you?
George was a magician. Baba did it. George kept calling until he finally got a seat. But he told me from the beginning, he said, you're going to get a seat on this flight. You are going to get a seat. And I had seats on the return, but I didn't have a seat to come. And just a few days before I left to go to New York, he called and said, I had receipt.
And you finished your painting.
Actually, I finished 2 of them, and I brought 2 with me that at some point, I need to do that work while I'm here, because it's immediate when I get back. I have to have them, but I did get 2 done. Yes?
Well, you know, you mentioned that Bob's face appeared on that canvas.
Yes.
That blank. Did it stay there?
Oh, yes.
So you filled it in and all?
I didn't touch it.
You just left?
I didn't touch it. Not, once I put that glaze over that one area and Baba's face came, I didn't touch it. All I did was put a frame on it and put it on the wall, and I said, it's mine forever. This is mine forever. It never leaves. Yeah. Yes.
Throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, what kind of contact did you get from India, Myrtle Beach? You said Elizabeth Patterson would send Christmas cards, or?
Someone was sending, Monty was sending the family letter, you know, that she sent every year.
And you would get that?
We would get that. Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I felt very close to my understanding of God from the time I was very young. And I remember walking to school one day, and I could show you just the spot on the sidewalk where this happened. Just out of the blue, I got this very powerful message. And it said, I will never give you anything that I have not prepared you for. And so, for the rest of my life, I always felt that whatever came, I was prepared for. And that it was God's doing.
Did your family have discussions concerning the family letters you would receive from Mommy? And particularly, did your father how did your father's relationship to the correspondence evolve over time?
No, I really can't answer that. I don't know. I don't know that Daddy ever realized who Baba is. And you have to think about the 50s and 60s, what it was like to be living in Oklahoma. You've been raised Christian. You are very active in a church, and that's exactly where Baba wanted us. I mean, he wouldn't have wanted it any other way. And so nothing was ever forced on us. I think one of the funniest things, and I forgot to tell you all this, this is one of my favorite things, is when the Baba lovers would come to see us.
Oh,
Anytime the front doorbell rang, it was a Baba lover, because no one else came to the front door. And I can remember we would be sitting, you know, in the sunroom watching TV, and the front doorbell would ring, and my mother would be, and my father would answer the door, and he would take whoever it was into the living room, and they would sit and they would talk for a while, and my mother would just stay. And you have to understand, this was the 60s. And most of the Baba lovers that were coming to see my father were from California. And so, I know, you know, long hair, Volkswagens with flowers all over. The whole 9 yards. And so you really think about it. This was my only connection. This was my connection. The hippies from California. And so Who was Baba?
I wonder you were wondering about the,
Yeah, yes. Yeah, Miriam.
Margaret,
Yes.
Mara, could you tell us about your impression of Mara?
You know, I didn't get to be with Mara because she was so badly injured. They were very well protected by all the people that came. I mean, it seemed like people just poured into that little town and just took over the hospital. And that was one of the things that Mary told me today. She said, I remember how gracious your father was about just allowing us to just take over the hospital, literally. I mean, they did all the laundry, they were bringing the food in, they were everywhere, you know, taking care of Baba and Mara and Meheru. So Mara was just across the hall. I think they had put her bed in the x-ray room. I knew where she was. I just wasn't really allowed to see her. She was really in bad shape. So, yes.
Do you remember Merchant and Dennis and Charming when they came to
Yes. My mother said she'd never seen a woman with so many diamonds in her whole life. She had a diamond ring on every finger, and she wore them every day. And I remember Charmian. Charmian was probably 18 or 19 at the time, and she was always doing laundry.
How old were you at the time?
I was 10. Yeah. Yes.
You were mentioning your Doonie stick of resistance.
oh, yes.
And I just wondered if there was some closure that you would care to share.
With the Doonie stick? When I was I had determined when I went to Los Angeles, I knew they'd have a Doonie, so I thought, okay, I'm throwing resistance into the Doonie in Los Angeles. And for some reason, my back and my neck, all of a sudden, I was so stiff, I couldn't move, you know. And there was this wonderful young lady there who was an acupuncturist. And so the afternoon before the Doonie, she gave me an acupuncture treatment. And I said, if this puts me to sleep before the Doonie, you have to throw my stick in the fire. And it doesn't work. No, Elaine, it doesn't work. So anyway, I remember that night, Val was speaking, and I was trying so hard to be alert and to listen because Val made me sit in front of him every single talk. And if I was back here, he would look through the audience and he would go. And if there wasn't a seat available, he made that person move, you know. And so in the middle of his talk, I looked at him and I just was like, and I got up and I had to go to bed. I couldn't sit up any longer, and I missed the Doonie. So the next morning.
You'll be here till the 12th.
No, I'm not going to be here till the 12th.
That's funny.
Yeah. So anyway, no, resistance has not gone into the fire, but
It's on its way.
Bob has done a pretty good number on me the last few days, so I don't think I need a fire. Yes.
My last question.
Yes.
How did it feel to you when you first went to the Samadhi your very first time?
You asked good questions.
Yeah, good question.
You know, when I got here, I thought, I'm not going to the Samadhi till tomorrow. I'm not going to do it till tomorrow. But Nancy was here, and she was going up for Arti, and she said, let's just go on up. And I thought, okay. And I walked in, and I thought about this, because when I saw Bob last, I was standing next to his bed. So for me to be able to go in, he was laying down again. And when I went in, I just told him that I was back. And I hoped he was happy, because I was very happy. And then I went to see Mara, and then I went to see Monty, and I just cried for a long time. A very long time. So, and Barbara made me very calm the days before I came. It was like I was on a sedative, but I wasn't. And so my expectations for going to the Samadhi were, I was totally open. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know how I would feel. And I just felt like when I was 10 years old, and I got to see Baba, and he smiled and touched me, and I felt like he smiled and touched me again. That's how I felt. Anything else?
Perfect timing, my boss is providing.
George.
Hon, could you move us up?
Oh, so sorry.
And then what we do is program your internet number into so you can do it from our Yeah, really.
You're so honest, a rarity.
Thank you. We have this tradition, we all love to come up and greet the people who have talked. Thank you so much. So sweet.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, I'll tell you that. It's really my joy.
Lindsay, you're standing in front of the camera.
Camera? That was priceless. That was priceless.
Come around this way. Come around this way. Come around back. Come around back.
Say goodbye to everybody. Candid shots.
That was beautiful.
Shoulder work if you want. Look at Jerry. Can you see?